Well, good evening, folks. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. And this is a bit of a different stream than I'm used to doing. I've got a very special guest with me tonight, Tony Brewer. Tony's a good friend of mine for, I'll say, going on 30 years, close to it. And he's in town. He did a gospel meeting in West Tennessee. Get that out of the way a little bit. In Greenfield, Tennessee last week. Ended Wednesday night.
Yep.
And I was to be doing a gospel meeting in Cave City. It started last night, and it ended last night. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about this evening.
When tragedy strikes.
When tragedy strikes. So, I have a very small audience, and they all know you.
Oh.
So, you can tell them anything you want to.
Well, my name is Tony. As Barry said, I'm special, and in more ways than one. I don't know, and I hope I don't get emotional in this silly live stream that we're doing, because, I mean, not that the live stream, the material's not silly and the tragedy's not silly, but I feel like a little child. I've really felt like a little child all week because I went back home to Greenfield, and I was a homegrown boy speaking to people that knew me growing up. And even though I was already supposed to be a fully fledged adult when I hit Greenfield, I wasn't grown up. I feel like that, like you count my age from when I hit Greenfield. Not taking away from anything that my parents did in the past, but you know, they were doing the best they could with what they had, and they got me to where I could be influenced by folks at Greenfield. And so it was almost like I had this first part of my life then the next part of my life at Greenfield, and then here lately I feel like it's leveled up again. It's almost like the path of a prophet or something. In the Old Testament, they had those stages of life. And so, I mean, I feel like I'm about 20 years old in my, like, if you know a really responsible 20-year-old, well, you know me, but I'm 47. So
I don't know any really responsible 20-year-olds, but whatever.
Well, now you see the issue. Now you see my problem. But yeah, if y'all know me, you've known me from online, or I've come and preached to you, and yeah, it was something last night. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a little bit here. But yeah, so Tony and I, the first place I preached out of Memphis School of Preaching was the Mount Zion Church of Christ in Northwest Tennessee, Obion County, and that's where Tony grew up. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I know everybody he knows. He knows more than I do, but we know the same people.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time in those hills, and so we have I would call it a very special connection. I did your wedding. Right. Was it 99, 2000?
99, December 11, 99.
Okay. I did their wedding.
You did a good job.
And it's Atoka? Was that the?
Atoka. Well, she is from Atoka, but I think that little church building was in Munford or Millington. I can't remember.
Somewhere around there.
Yes.
But anyway, so again, we've known each other for a long time. We've had a lot of fun today.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun today.
Today's my birthday.
Yep.
We had breakfast with a good friend here from Mammoth, Joe Flynn, and we went out to his house and we fired off a bunch of rounds. AK-47, AR-15, 9mm, 22.
Buddy, if there ever was a lead tree going to grow anywhere, it'd be in that field.
And a 21.
A 21
I had never even heard
of 21 millimeter, 21 caliber.
I'd never even heard of that.
Nor I.
So that was fun.
But that thing's fast and it's like a laser.
Yeah.
Like it, and that boy, he's my age, our age. That fella, that gentleman whose guns we shot. The only time I've ever shot rifles that were that dialed in was running around with them boys at Palmersville in Weakley County. You know, growing up in them hills and everything. You know, if you take you use brush guns. You hunted with a 357 Magnum, a 30-30, a 30-06. I remember my cousin, whenever he got a 243, but my cousin might as well. I mean, he was like Nimrod, the mighty hunter. That dude tracked deer all the time, and he was the only person I knew growing up that consistently harvested deer. But he used that little bitty old chunk of lead. It just goes real fast, and the 243 started gaining him. This is not a gun show, but anyway, I'm sorry.
I hunt with a 243 myself. It's a good gun.
Yeah, it surely is.
So we're together this weekend. This is how this worked out. So he had the gospel meeting in Greenfield, Tennessee, which is a great congregation.
Oh, yeah.
When Gail and I got married, we lived in Greenfield for a little while. Of course, I knew that congregation before that period of time.
Yeah.
And so his meeting finished on Wednesday. My meeting started and finished on Friday. And that's what we're going to talk about. Well, I mean, we're not going to talk about that meeting, but this idea of when tragedy strikes. So I'm going to put an image up here on the screen for you to see. I'm going to leave I guess I can block the camera out to not distort the picture, but here's the inside of the Cave City Church of Christ in Cave City, Arkansas. I thought it was a beautiful little building.
It was.
They had it, I think they redid it, I think they said like 10 years ago or something.
No, don't give me the line.
And when we sat in the car to leave, I turned the car on, the clock said 8:38 p.m.
Yeah.
And this tornado that came through, I mean, there were like, if I'm remembering correctly, like 4 tornadoes on the ground at once in different parts of Arkansas.
Yeah, and this is this north central Arkansas.
Yes.
Like we're on the Missouri line.
Right. This because Bakersfield, Missouri got hit, Cave City got hit, yeah. And so this tornado hit, it was like 10:33. So basically 2 hours after you and I got in the car and left.
Right, which means I need to issue a retraction because I told my family that it was an hour, but that's not true. So,
well,
I get a little exaggerated when I
it was
emotional.
So it was like a 50-minute drive from Cave City to my house.
Yeah.
Very windy. Just it felt weird.
Yes, it did.
But we got home in time and nothing wrong at Mammoth Spring, thankfully. But yeah, the Cave City church building was destroyed. And a lot of things in Cave City were destroyed. And so we were talking about this today a little bit, and I said, well, why don't we go live this evening and let's talk about when tragedy strikes and what you do. Yeah,
and to build on what you just said, tell me if you think I'm right. You know, we stayed 40-something minutes, maybe 50 minutes, talking to all the people that I hadn't seen in 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if we would have stayed, if we'd have stayed as little as 20 or 30 more minutes, well, obviously we wouldn't have been hit by the storm, but we would have been forced to hunker down in the building, which you see where we would have been when the storm hit.
Yeah.
And that was, I don't know if God did that or not, but I know if I was standing up and I fell asleep while I was standing up talking, and when I woke up, I kind of, okay, there's Kenny, we're good.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, guys, I just dissociated. We need to go. I was like, I got to go lay my head down.
So Tony drove, where he lives is east of Maine in New Brunswick in Canada. He drove approximately 35 hours.
36 hours.
And I messed with him. I said, he drove 36 hours just to hear me preach on a Friday night.
I would have.
Not quite true, but anyway, you can see the results of that storm. And again, that's just partial. Think about the rest of the city of Cave City, and it was just tore up. So anyway, that's what I was talking to him about earlier. Let's talk about when tragedy strikes and what do you do?
Well, I tell you, a good diving board, I'll bounce on it a little bit. I'll read our little intro.
Perfect.
Tragedy is a reality in this fallen world, whether it comes in the form of natural disasters, personal loss, sickness, or persecution. It forces people to ask hard questions about why it happens and how to respond. Many blame God, assuming he directly causes suffering to teach lessons or to punish sins. Others believe that if tragedy strikes, it must mean they deserved it. Neither of these ideas holds up. The case of Job is a prime example, and that's what I thought of first.
Yeah.
I believe I'm having trouble with the English language, Barry.
That's all right. We'll get through it.
Yes, sir.
So, I know I'm not original with anything, but retribution theology.
Well, yeah.
It's like you do bad, you get bad. You do good, you get good.
I've heard that in the church even.
And so that's kind of what I want us to talk about tonight. And like I said, Tony worked up some material here, and it's pretty good. That's what we're going to talk about. But people, from my perspective, a lot of times it's people always want to, when something happens, whether bad or good, we've got to somehow place God in that.
We look for meaning.
Yes.
And I don't believe it's always nefarious to ascribe tragedies impetus to God, We do it because God is the prime mover and the Almighty. And what makes you feel less powerful and smaller than a hurricane or a tornado? It's got to be God, right?
Yeah.
And I guess in a way it is. We'll probably touch that in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And I think particularly, and I don't think this is a good thing,
Correct.
particularly when bad things happen, we look for God.
Sure.
But,
God's going to be found in the thick blackness.
well, like,
Oh, I see what you mean. We look for God, like we look to lay it at God's feet.
yes.
I see what you mean.
And
I
I've
misunderstood.
said that in sermons and stuff, and I'm sure you've expressed the same sentiment of we lay a lot of things at the feet of God that shouldn't be there.
I heard Tom Holland in a sermon really get on to everybody there about, he quoted everybody's going to suffer. You're going to suffer as an evildoer. You're going to suffer as a godly person. Peter lays that out.
Mm.
And he said, folks, there's a lot of people. He said, if you suffered tragedy, if you suffer evil and you're a Christian, you lay that at the wrong person's feet when you lay it at God's feet. That's Satan's fault. I think about the tragedy in my life. Every bit of it is Satan's fault. Whether it was Satan working through me or other people, it was Satan's fault. There's an evil in this world, and it ain't God perpetuating it.
Yeah, yeah. One verse I think of, like, of course, James 1:17, every good and perfect gift comes from above. We need to keep that in mind. And we shouldn't have, and I've seen this too, and I know you have too, the idea when you become a Christian, when you try to live a godly life, those bad things won't happen. Maybe not that they won't ever happen, but things are going to get a whole lot easier.
I think easier. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Because I think you're going to still eat the same amount of tragedy.
Yes.
It just is easier to bear.
It's not that bad stuff doesn't happen to good people. It's
good people handle bad things.
Faithful children of God have a different worldview.
Amen.
They have a different frame of reference. And so I can
73.
handle them differently.
Yes. Yeah, when I thought to know this is more than I could bear. I thought I washed my hands in innocency, but I thought it didn't do any good. But then when I went into the house of the Lord, I understood their end. That's a good psalm. We should have just did that psalm.
Well, it's still there. I mean,
I know it. We can still do it.
All right. So your material here goes right to Job.
That's where I went right in my mind.
Me too. Because, well, we look at Job, and if you're any sort of Bible student, you've hopefully read the book of Job, and he loses everything. Except
for the one thing he probably really needed to get rid of, his wife.
Well,
think about that.
Yeah.
Satan, think about it. That one comedian does that bit where he pretends he's that demons, and then Satan, and the demon's like, well, Satan, look what all you did to him, and you took away his wife, and you took away his animals, you took away his livelihood, you took away his children, you took away his house, you afflicted his body with boils and sores, and he's in the dump scraping himself with a potsherd. You still got more you can do. Well, no, I did everything God told me I could do. Well, yeah, but he still got his wife. No, I know what I'm doing. We're going to leave her alone.
She's where she needs to be.
Right where she needs to be.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, as you just stated, Job lost everything, his wealth, children, health, etc. Yet he had done nothing to deserve it. But what's the tenor throughout the book from Job?
Well, from Job himself is, I'm righteous. I haven't changed. His three buddies that sat in a dump with him are saying you're wicked. But Job says, no, God, you have the right to do this. I just would like to know why. Mm-hmm. Is there some lesson in this? What am I supposed to learn? What's the purpose? I'm questioning you, God. And I'm going to bounce that back to you.
Well, so right there in Job chapter 1, we're told that he neither sinned with his lips nor charged God foolishly. So one thing I think about tragedy, it's not wrong to wonder.
No, it's not.
Why in the world is this happening to me like this right now, whatever? That's not a sin. And
right.
I've kind of heard that expressed, like you should never have that mentality of why do bad things happen to me.
I remember a preacher in the past who said, I'm done with this God stuff. I'm going to quit, go buy a motel and just earn a living that way. That was Jeremiah. but there was a fire in his bones. Like that's the thing. Something. So it's interesting when you hear the word of God aloud, and you quoted that quote, charged God foolishly. Well, that means he still charged God.
Right.
And that means for our podcast today, as we're helping people deal with this tragedy, it's not foolish to, like, it's reasonable to be like, hey, God, why did this happen? Why did you? So it's not that's not foolish.
Yeah.
Just follow Job's path.
Right.
You know,
Well,
I've never thought of that.
Well, to kind of jump from chapter 1 to chapter 38,
Yeah.
God never answers that question.
No.
From the way I look at the book of Job, he just starts off, okay, well, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?
Job goes, put that
Yeah,
hand over that mouth.
So, all right. You have Job 1 and 2 in here, shows, and that's, to me, that's big too, is, okay, so he neither sinned with his mouth nor charged God foolishly, but his perception of the events were extremely limited, just like ours are.
Very myopic compared to God.
Yeah. And he wants to stand before God. He wants to plead his case. He wants God to answer him.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as we know, having the entirety of the book, God wasn't responsible for the bad things that happened, although God permitted those bad things to happen.
Yeah, I think that's because God allows the entities that he creates to exercise free will. And without getting way off in the weeds, I have a feeling that after Job, I don't believe Satan was allowed to touch anybody directly. I think after Job, he was bound a little bit and he could influence the nations. And then once Christ came into the world, he was bound in that pit on that chain for 1,000 years, and he couldn't even influence the nations directly.
Yeah. That's another interesting thing, kind of, again, off course a bit, but there are very few instances of, like what happened with, Satan singling out a particular individual.
Well, what other would it be besides Job?
Well, you have David.
Yeah, but did David...
counting Israel, the censor.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
Not censor. What am I?
No, the census.
Census.
Not
Yeah.
censor, the census.
And then Satan has sought you to sift you as wheat.
Yeah.
To the apostles.
Yep. You're right there. So that would be the third, rather, counting Job.
What else am I thinking of? Of course, you've got the encounter with Christ.
Well, yeah. And arguably, we could put that off to the side as different, but he was human, so we're going to put it in 4.
But out of all the characters in the Bible, let's just say 4.
And look at how novel each of those were on the world scene, and look at how unique they were from each other.
Yeah.
I would imagine that a fellow with a good mind, that's why I'm putting it out there so somebody can do it, could look at all 4 of those accounts and look at the core reason for the direct involvement of Satan and how it was different. Like, we know why Job's was. Job challenged God. God had to face that challenge, and the war was fought between Satan and God. Job was the battlefield, as Curtis and Dan Cates has said, and he went scorched earth.
Yeah.
But then think about David. Oh man, we're all right. For those of you that are subscribed to the Christianity Now Substack, you'll be getting this material in a few days. I guarantee it. That's too good. I'm going to develop that. I'm already working on it.
Yeah.
That's a good one. It's in my head.
So a very limited number of particular, and I guess the reason I'm thinking that is because when we talk about tragedy, so and I even hear this among Christians, is
right.
Satan's really, he's coming after me now.
After me.
So you're putting, that's like okay, so you're Job, you're Jesus, you're David, you're...
And Tony.
And the apostles and Tony.
Yeah.
And Barry.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm with you, Satan is extremely limited.
Right.
And so Jonathan Jenkins, he's a friend of mine. I know you know him.
Mm.
I'd never really thought of it like this before, but he talked about how oftentimes we elevate, God's up here and we're way down here, but we've got Satan just a little bit below God in terms of power and control.
Lateral.
Yeah.
Or lateral,
right there
just
with him.
equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Satan has no attributes of deity whatsoever.
Right.
None.
But at times, and particularly in times of tragedy, he's discussed as if he is
Yes.
divine.
I think it's because of misunderstanding of 1 Peter, is it 3:8? Be sober, be
5:8.
vigilant, because it's 5:8. I'm
Yep.
sorry. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walketh the earth as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's 100% true, because Peter said it. But I think we'd have to, kind of parse that out and put
Sure.
it in its context.
Well, but then you write the immediate following sentence is, "Whom resist steadfast in the faith."
Yeah, and if
So-
you stand with God, Satan's not going to mess with you.
Yeah.
He
Satan's
can
not-
get you. He's going to come at you from a different angle, but he can't get at you directly.
Not only is he not even near the level of God, God's sovereignty, his omnipotence, all those attributes of the divine,
Right.
but he's not even as powerful as we are.
I
mean,
think he can do. In his realm, like if we were transported to the spiritual realm, we'd be in trouble. But we're not spiritual beings fully realized yet.
Right.
I think about 1 John. We're going to be like him, and we'll see him as he is.
Right.
I think once that happens, we won't have to. But if we run into Satan, we'd whoop up on him just like Jesus would in that way. But yeah, I think you're exactly. I've never thought about that. It's really blown my brain up. Yeah, I think we are more powerful than, obviously, when we stand with God. But
Sure, of course.
I'd like to parse that out, maybe late night over a coffee or something at the coffee over pineapple cake about, even if people are not with God, are they more powerful than Satan in this realm?
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be, because they can resist him without God, because they got to be able to get to God without God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when I say does that make sense, what I mean is not are you smart enough to understand it, is am I explaining it correctly? Because if there's a disconnect, it's my fault.
Well, what was I going to say?
Man, I don't know. I'm real sorry.
Okay.
I interrupted.
Well, that's okay. I like this sentence here.
Sure.
God allowed the trial, but he did not cause it. The purpose was not to punish Job.
That's right.
And I mean, and again, that's kind of the conceptualization that people have, is God's punishing me for some bad thing. What had Job done to deserve what he went through?
He was upright and perfect, feared God, and eschewed evil.
There's nobody else like him.
None. It says that. I forgot.
Yeah, there's nobody else like Job.
Him. And Satan even said, there's nobody else like Job on all the earth, but you've got a hedge around him. He serves you. Does he serve you for nothing?
Now, see, and you can push back on this. I've always thought, if you disagree with me, that's fine. The statement there is from God. Did Satan know beforehand? I don't know. Have you considered my servant Job? But then Satan does bring up, well, but you've hedged him in.
That's right. Yeah, I did attribute something God said to Satan there.
No, what I'm asking is, okay, God's foreknowledge, God's omnipotence, I guess we're kind of departing from top. Did Satan know that Job was perfect and faithful and there's nobody else like him?
Here's the thing. I don't know. It's possible he didn't, but it's possible. So think of, I compare that to the account of Nicodemus coming to Jesus. So Nicodemus came to Jesus at night and Master, we know Rabbi, we know that thou art
a teacher come
from God, for nobody can do these miracles unless God's with him. And Jesus disconnects from that conversation. He doesn't have a logical reply. He says, unless you're born of water and the Spirit. All right. Now, and I've always made the point, Jesus cut right to the chase, and he can do that because he's God. You and I can do that, but we have to ask questions. So why do people come? Now, if God and Jesus, if the first and the second member of the Godhead are both God, and they both have the same omniscience, omnipotence, and such like, Satan came there to challenge. And he might have not have ever considered Job, but God knew what Satan wanted. And instead of waiting for him to say, God, you're not powerful, you're not worthy of worship because all you do is protect people. And if you hurt them a little bit, they wouldn't worship you. God just did what Jesus did in Nicodemus, cut right to, hey, where you been? Walking to and fro up and down the earth. You seen Job? Have you considered him? Like if you really want to, if you're really here to attack me and to make me look bad, Have you considered Job? It's almost like sometimes in debate, I give people the strongest argument. I make their argument for them that's the strongest against my position. I think that's what I've never considered this before at all. I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
I think I'd almost die on that hill.
Okay. Well, so
Is that pretty close to what you was thinking?
yes,
Well, you're pretty smart.
something like that. I think you're right.
Yeah, you're pretty smart.
So God allowed the trial, but he did not cause it. The purpose was not to punish Job, but to demonstrate his faithfulness. So again, kind of the concept of well, either Satan's really after me or God's punishing me.
Yeah.
It's like what do you call that? What is a zero-sum game? Is that what
Zero-sum game? It's a dichotomy. It's a false binary.
Yeah.
A false binary.
Yeah.
And some of you folks listening in the crowd, y'all probably know more about that than us. Help us with what that's actually called.
All right. Okay. The reality of a fallen world. Let's talk about that. That's your next section here.
Oh, can I lay the groundwork for this?
Absolutely.
All right. There's only 2 times in Scripture where this phrase, windows of heaven, are used. The last time it's used is in the book of Micah. You know, there's like 6 questions that God says, here's what you say, and here's my answer. Will a man rob God? And you say, well, how can a man rob God? You rob me in tithes and offerings. Let me tell you what you need to do. Bring all your tithes and offerings in and see whether or not I don't open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that you can't even contain it in your storehouses. The first time that's used is in Genesis 6. When God opens up the windows of heaven and pours out his wrath. It's serious. Now we can get both from God. Well, metaphorically we can get his wrath, but they literally got his wrath.
Right.
And every time you flinch at a peal of thunder or a flash of lightning, every time you hunker down against strong winds, every time you shiver in the cold, every time you're wet and miserable, that is a byproduct, a subsequent consequence, a residual effect from thousands of years ago when God poured out his wrath. So even that tornado that come through, it wasn't God, it was Satan. And that's because, and of course, when you go to the reason Genesis 6 happened is because Genesis 1 happened. And of course, we have Genesis 3:17 through 19, which records how the ground was cursed. Labor became painful for women, and death entered the world, and this corruption extended to nature itself. And I used to cringe when I hear the denominations because, you want to think, well, we're not going to be on a renewed. No, well, creation is we're still fallen. This world is still like the reason you get stick tights, cockleburrs, and splinters, and briar brambles in your fingers, is because Adam and Eve ate the fruit. And then the reason you got the flood is because it got worse from there. So,
yeah, everything got really bad after Genesis 3.
Yes.
And everything got really, really bad after Genesis 6.
Ooh,
I mean, it was nothing's ever been the same since.
No.
So, natural disasters.
Yes.
Did God send that tornado to Cave City?
He did not.
I mean, the hurricanes, I don't know what. Well, I suppose where you live, you might have some hurricane-ish kind of weather.
We'll get hurricanes. We'll get nor'easters.
Nor'easters, okay.
The first year I was there, a big a medium-sized nor'easter blew.
Yeah.
We had about 5 or 6 feet of snow.
Wow.
It got down to about negative 40-something degrees. And, that was different.
So there is a natural order of things.
Right.
In the beginning, God set things in order, and it was all very good. But because of sin, many other things now that are not good were introduced into the cosmos.
Yes.
And not just the natural disasters and such, but even physical maladies that we can experience.
Cancer.
Yeah.
I hate cancer.
Cancer, type 1 diabetes.
Type 1 diabetes.
Heart.
That's
you name it.
That's the congenital diabetes, type 1.
What's the word? Juvenile?
Yeah. Not congenital. That's where you're born with it. Yeah. I'm not a doctor. I'm not your doctor.
All of these things were ushered in, ultimately by sin.
Right.
Genesis 3, the first, and then the overabundance of sin, as recorded there in Genesis. Every thought of man's heart was only evil continually. That's like an extremely emphatic sentence there. What is that, Genesis 6:5?
Yeah.
Only evil continually. So this means that natural disasters, tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes are not, quote, you say, acts of God in the sense that he actively sends them as punishment. They are the ongoing consequences of a world marred by sin. What do you got there?
I think I got a good way of thinking about this I've never exactly thought of.
Okay.
But I got to find this verse. I can never find. There it is. I can never find it when I first look for it.
What verse is
Romans 1:27.
Yeah.
And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and this is the phrase of interest, and receiving in themselves recompense of their error, which was meat. And does it say something different in the new KJV besides meat? I hope
Which
it does.
was due.
Which was due. Very good. So the word meet, when you read it in the KJV, think about two puzzle pieces meeting. Like my wife is a help space. A help meet's not a word.
Right.
Although it is now because we've used it so much, it's entered into our vernacular.
Help me.
Help meet. Help meet. I got a help meet. I got it. No, you have a help that is perfectly suited. She's good in all the ways you're bad. She's bad in all the ways you're good. She's strong in all the ways you're weak. She's weak in all the ways you're strong. The recompense of their actions, their sinful actions, is what they got, which was meat. The punishment fit the crime. So if God's going to, chastise you for being sexually promiscuous, the easiest thing to do is to give you a sexually transmitted disease, and therefore you will not be able to find willing sexual partners. So you are now a chaste individual, whether you want to be or not. God chastised you. Now, God didn't set up on a cloud and said, I don't like those men versus their men with those men. Zap, they've got AIDS now. But when God said, let there be light, he set up the rules of the cosmos. When man perverts the rules of the cosmos, there are negative consequences because the cosmos is in balance, and it makes that out of balance.
No.
Tornadoes, all right, whenever man perverts things, we get the recompense of those actions that are commensurate with those actions. So the rules of the cosmos were violated, and a subsequent consequence of that were the erratic weather patterns. It's Genesis 6. In Genesis 3, at the fall of man, it was women painful in labor. It was because I think a lot of reasons why the labor is painful and it's difficult for women is the physical pain, yes, but women are now, a woman is dependent upon a man. Like in this new age where we've nursed the world, women think they're independent. But go to a third world country, there's no feminism in a third world country.
Yeah.
Because women have to do women things and men have to do men things, because women can only do women things and men can only do men things.
Right.
And when you jack around with that, you get Western culture in its worst sense, where society is devolving. That is a punishment that's meet for that crime, but God didn't do it.
Yeah.
God, it's just part of it's built into it's built into the rules of the game.
Well, so how would you, so a verse I'm thinking of as you're talking, how would you put in there Genesis 4:7? If you do well, you will be accepted. If not, sin lies at the door.
Okay, that's can I, would you turn there?
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, you turn there, but I can go there.
Okay.
All right, so, sorry, this got me a little excited. So Abel makes a good sacrifice. Cain doesn't. Cain is jealous, and he hates God, and he can't kill God, so he kills Abel. And that sums up a whole lot of why mass tragedy happens. People hurt people because they're mad at God, and they can't get God. So they get the people. So God comes to him and says, why art thou wroth, and why hast thou countenance fallen? And this should be an a priori observation. If thou doest well, will it not be accepted of thee? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So you're going to enter into a copulative relationship with sin. the progeny of which is death and destruction, or destruction then death, which is a corollary parallel to James when he says, be not deceived. Let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God, because God cannot be tempted of evil, neither tempteth any man, but every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. And lust, when it conceives, brings forth sin. The progeny of that conception is death, a stillborn baby. It takes two to conceive. My lust conceives with action. So that's a sin. So Cain is like, well, what do you want me to do? And he says, well, righteous Abel's blood crieth out. And so you're cursed. The threefold curse. If you violate the rules of the cosmos, you're not going to have a tribe. You're going to be a vagabond.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first one was the earth is not going to yield her strength.
And that was a strike directly at at what he did.
Yes.
Cain.
He was a tiller of the earth.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a tribe. You're going to be a vagabond. And you're only going to be alive because of charity. People are just not going to, people love God enough that they're going to not kill you. Like they marked him. If you today, if you're a miscreant, if you're a liar, if you're a thief, if you're a murderer, they'll put you in jail, and they'll put you in jail for that other stuff too, but you can be a liar and a thief and be just petty and stay out of jail. But you're going to be a vagabond. You're not going to have a tribe around you to help you successful. You're going to have to work 10 times as hard to live in this world, and a lot of times the only reason you're going to be alive is because charity. People are going to give you things to just keep you alive enough so you don't die. That's your life when you violate the rules of the cosmos. And that's how I would work that in there. It's built into the system. It's not into the system. I don't think it's anything God did directly to Cain.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything God did directly to the earth. The reason the earth was not going to yield like it did for Cain is because Cain was not going to be allowed to be in one place long enough to till it and cultivate it.
Yeah.
And then of course you have the other. So
yeah.
So that's how I'd work that in.
Yeah.
You know, and that's on a microcosmic scale of an individual. But Genesis, it was on the macro or the cosmic scale. And we're still dealing with this collective sin of humanity today. That's when we got the tornado in Cave City.
Right. If you live in certain parts of the world, you're going to suffer certain things that other people won't ever suffer.
That's it. And it's built into the cosmos.
And it's not God doing that directly because Cave City was a wicked place.
It was because Genesis chapter 6.
Yeah.
These rules were violated and multiplied, maybe at this point, hundreds of generations are dealing with the consequences of the sin of one generation.
Yep.
And that's earthly consequences. They're not guilty of the spiritual side of that.
Yeah. So just real quick, Ted Hook Knight.
Well, hey, Ted Hook Knight.
How in the world did he get back in the country? Must be a friend of Mr. T.
I had to pay the I had to pay the tariffs. I had to pay a tariff on all of my riches.
Well,
yeah, they ended up owing me $47.
You're welcome.
You mean I'm supposed to pay 25% on everything I own? Well, here it is. Oh, well, sir, we owe you money.
Deborah, yes, I will put this on the YouTube channel. It's Deborah O'Neill. All right, so back to the material here. We're talking, what was this particular section called? The reality of a fallen world. Okay, so that is the world in which we exist. And I don't, again, earthquakes, tornadoes. I lived in Pensacola for a while, the threat of hurricanes. If you live on the Gulf Coast,
tidal waves, hurricanes.
You're going to suffer that kind of stuff. And
great white sharks.
It's not because New Orleans is
sinful.
It's because that's the order of things.
That's where New Orleans is.
Essentially after Genesis 6.
Yeah. And between us chickens, God sets the borders and the seas and stuff like that. And New Orleans pushed the sea, that they violated God's border. And they get all that flooding. I don't know.
What is the verse? As soon as you said that,
I know.
Was that Acts 17?
If you'll turn the cameras and the microphone off, I'll Google it.
Yeah. I think. Well, is it Acts 17? He set their boundaries.
Oh, that is. But I don't. No, that's the boundaries. That's the nations.
Okay.
No, it's in one of the prophets in the long ago. And if I thought it was holy to make a bet, I'd bet Ted Hook Knight $1 to a donut that he'd be able to know it off the top of his head.
Well, we'll give him a few minutes here and let us know.
Yeah, because it's on a delay.
Right. So it is a reality that we live in a fallen world, and there are severe consequences to that, and some that I mean, and just to be honest, sometimes you wonder. I mean, even
Job wondered. You're in good company.
yeah,
If you wonder, you're in good company,
yeah,
folks.
yeah. Speaking and walking in truth. So, what is the Christian's response to living in a fallen world and seeing what we see? So, I saw a report today on Facebook. I think it was, and this is the Missouri side of the storm from last night. 16 people dead.
Yeah.
I think 11 dead in Arkansas, something like that. Hopefully, I'm not incorrect about that. But the key for Christians is to walk in truth no matter what happens.
That's it.
Walk
and speak.
If we don't have the proper frame of reference in this world, this stuff will just destroy you.
It will.
Because,
it may destroy you anyway.
Well,
that's the thing.
Sure.
That's why it's so important to walk in truth and speak in truth.
Sure.
Because you're not guaranteed to get out of this world intact.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's, I mean, I know
excited.
you've seen it. I know I've seen it. People who, they're at the church building every time the door's open, but then some personal tragedy strikes and then they're not at the church building anymore. It's like the worst time to choose to leave God is the time they choose to leave God.
Amen.
And not that God's in a church building, but you know what I'm saying.
We're leaving God's people gather in a building, and if God's people gather in a building, that's a church building.
Exactly.
I don't care what anybody says.
Right.
So yes, you can use that as a metonymic phrase, like, well, don't leave the church. Well, that's the same thing as saying don't leave God.
Sure.
Or don't turn your back on God's people. That's the same thing as turning your back on God.
Right.
Paul persecuted Christians. Paul persecuted the church, but Jesus said, "Why are you persecuting me?"
Right.
So what you do to the church, you've done to God.
Yep. Well, so Deborah has put in 2 verses in our screen here. Proverbs 8:29, and it reads, "When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters would not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth."
Can't play without a partner.
And then she says, Jeremiah 5:22, which I was on my way. Is that it?
The Jeremiah. I did not remember the one in Proverbs. The Jeremiah one is what I was thinking of.
Jeremiah 5:22. "Do you not fear me, says the Lord? Will you not tremble at my presence? Who have placed the sand as the bound of the sea?" That's interesting. The sand as the bound of the sea. Funny how that works.
So I mean, look at all the cities that have violated that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
God don't sit up there in heaven and send hurricanes to New Orleans. But if you violate that boundary, it's bad things are going to happen.
Yeah, and if you live in a hole.
And you live in a hole, it's going to fill up with water.
Yeah. "By a perpetual decree that it cannot pass beyond it. And though its waves toss to and fro, yet they cannot prevail." The waves can't prevail over the sand.
I wrote
Though they
an article.
roar, yet they cannot pass over it.
Right. I wrote an article about this, about the foolishness of being. Now, we should be stewards of our world. And if you want to dump 100 billion gallons of oil in the ocean, you're going to kill everything. I get it. But as long as you're a good steward, this earth is going to last until God says, come home.
We
So
can't
God
destroy
said,
this earth.
We cannot destroy the.
I mean, we can hurt.
Well, I'm trying to think if we let off all the nuclear bombs.
Well,
like it would have to be a concerted, unified effort.
it's the most extreme thing we could possibly think of.
That's it.
That might do some damage.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then you would only have a nuclear winter, and you might have a 98% die-off of humanity. I've watched those documentaries.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a doctor, but I did say it in Holiday
If you
Inn
pull
Express.
a Thanos.
If you pull a Thanos, but there's a thing, Thanos don't exist in God's universe.
Right. All right, so if a person speaks and lives according to the truth, the outcome, whether good or bad, is ultimately within God's providence. And you've got how many points here to follow this?
I think 2.
Okay.
And then the third, the conclusion, the entailment.
Okay. If speaking and living truthfully results in a blessing, that is a gift from God. And of course, I referenced earlier James 1:17.
That's it.
Number 2, if speaking and living truthfully results in suffering, it is a trial to endure.
Which ultimately makes you better.
Right.
Because you're going through the refiner's fire.
Yeah. I mean, you've got 1 Peter 4, you've got James chapter 1.
Yep.
It's how you handle those things that do come your way. So this means that while the world remains broken and Satan continues to work through suffering, a Christian's duty is to remain steadfast. And I've often wondered if we fail to appreciate what it means to have it. God expects something of me as a Christian. And it's often more one-sided where, if I become a Christian, it's all on God. give me the good stuff. It's all going to be okay now. And that's just, well, health, wealth kind of gospel stuff. Well, I use that term loosely.
I get you.
It is our duty to remain steadfast. How do you remain steadfast? That's the question.
You got to keep walking, brother. Keep on walking. I love that song.
Yeah. You have to produce the fruit of the Spirit.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to develop the Christian graces of 2 Peter chapter 1, add to your faith virtue, not, etc.
Well, in those Christian graces is perseverance.
Yeah.
And then James 1, I can't do it unless I do the first verse. James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. My brethren, there it is. Count it all joy when you fall into different kinds of tragedy and tribulation and trial. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh perseverance or patience, perseverance. But you need to let perseverance be perfected, have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, lacking or wanting nothing.
Well, and if you think about that you may be perfect. I don't know if you've ever made this connection, and maybe I'm just weird and it really doesn't connect, but of the Christian graces, perseverance is followed immediately by brotherly kindness.
Because it's a lot easier to be kind whenever you've persevered through trials. But if that trial destroyed you, and you're resentful, bitter, angry, vindictive, you can't be kind to your brother.
Yeah. And if you don't surround yourself with the right people, you have to surround yourself with the right people to endure the trials of life.
That's why it was so hard on Cain. He was a vagabond. He didn't have he couldn't surround himself with the right people.
Yeah.
Because the right people couldn't have a murderer in their midst.
Right. So the role of God in tragedy, we go back to the beginning. What about the role of Satan in tragedy? That's the next part here.
Ooh, so hush your mouth.
Father was a murderer from the beginning. John 8:44.
Yeah.
Right? So in Job's case, Satan was given, and that's the key, he was given power. He was given access to Job. I don't think he had it.
No.
God granted it to him. And, you mentioned Brother Cates. Was Curtis Cates?
No, I only met Curtis Cates. I got to hear him do one chapel speech.
Okay. Well, he was director when I was in school.
Yes.
And surely you've heard the illustration. 2 trees and a lead line between the two. That's the dog on the chain between 2 trees. That was his description of Satan. Satan was and is extremely limited.
Yes.
He cannot violate your free will.
That's it.
So
Satan can only use persuasion, which incidentally, God has limited himself to only use persuasion.
Right.
God is able to use more than, God is able to compel, but because of the power of his word, he's limited to persuasion.
Yeah.
Sakes alive, we could talk for hours on that.
Deborah says, I don't think we can destroy the world. Springtime and harvest will be here until he comes. Referring back to, Genesis 8:22?
I hate it whenever I say something, people prove me wrong with the Bible.
Hey, Alice, good to see you. All right, so Satan was given power to strike Job's family, possessions, wealth, etc. That's when you mentioned Luke 22:31.
Right.
Satan to sift Peter as wheat. So this means that when tragedy strikes, one should not assume God is to blame, and that's the problem. I think there's no nice way to say this, but it's the mentality that people have toward God during times of tragedy is based, in my opinion, on an ignorance of Scripture. What else would you? Yes. Where else would you lay that blame?
And I've been that ignorant, guys. I mean, Barry and I both. We're not sitting up here. We get paid to study the Bible for 15 hours a day if we want to. It's not. I've always said this. I've always said this my whole life for the last 2 years. Sorry, I don't know if you need to listen to me or not. I've said this every chance I've gotten for about the last 2 years when I had this realization. The biggest room in everyone's life is a room for improvement. Yeah. Barry, do you need to study the Bible more than you do?
Yes, I do.
So do I. It is much easier to do that when you get paid to do it. Barry and I don't have to work 80 hours a week at a factory. Barry and I don't have to climb telephone poles to make sure people still have power and communication after tornadoes. So, that that family that struggles to show up at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night, Barry and I didn't have any of those struggles because we were at the church building studying. All we got to do is just walk from one room to another. So that's not lost on me.
Well,
So whenever people struggle with this, it's in large part because of ignorance. We're just describing reality. We're not making an ought claim, or we're not making an accusation.
right.
And so if you can't study the Bible 40 hours a week, then study the Bible as much as you can and surround yourself with good people who are mature in the faith that will keep you from those neurotic thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Find good shepherds that feed their flock.
Good shepherds that feed the flock.
Yep.
Sakes. That's what I told the folks at Greenfield in the last sermon. I said, if I've said anything this week that you disagree with, that Brent hasn't taught that way, Brent's right. I said, you're good elders. If I've taught anything that you think that they wouldn't teach, they're right. They're with you. They're feeding you day in, day out. I said, I'm just a fly-by-nighter that comes in and kicks a hornet's nest and stirs you up and leaves. I don't have to deal with the fallout.
Yeah. So what are you preaching on tomorrow?
I'm not preaching what you
Speaking
preached
of
last night.
Kicking a nest?
Right.
No.
I'm not preaching what it was. We're not going to say anything about what you preached at Cave City.
We just went out to eat and ran into some folks that we know who are members of the church at another local congregation. And they asked me, well, Barry, what did you preach on last night? I said, I don't know, but I'm never preaching it here at Mammoth.
That's it.
So,
That's it.
All right.
But yeah, so your elders, and I even said, here's the thing, even if I say something you disagree with, you know it's not going to be damaging to you if your elders allow me to come back in the pulpit the next day.
Yeah.
I might still be wrong, or they might be wrong and I'm right. But anytime there's a discrepancy between the gospel meeting preacher and the preacher and the elders is there is right.
Yeah.
They feed you. They watch. Well, the elders watch for your soul.
Yes.
Trust them. They're the ones that are day in, day out, staying up late nights praying. They're the ones that's going to come and pray with you at the hospital. It's not going to be me. I'm not going to be there.
Yep.
Anyway, I feel like I got up on a soapbox.
No, that's all right.
We're going to climb down.
We need to hear it.
But that's the thing. When we say it's largely in part because of ignorance, it's not a dig. It's you don't get paid to study. So surround yourself with a good eldership, a good preacher, good Christian brethren, and do everything you can to learn what Jesus would do and do that.
Yep. What else is there?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Let's look at this conclusion. When tragedy strikes, the wrong person to blame is God.
Amen.
Or assume that every hardship is divine punishment.
Amen.
Okay.
That's about all
yeah. The Bible reveals that suffering exists because of Satan's work, the effect of sin on creation, and the trials that test faith. A Christian's responsibility is to walk in truth, knowing that whatever the outcome is, whether the outcome is pleasant or painful, God remains in control. The sovereignty of God.
Yes, sir.
He is over all. And that's, to me, that's a whole nother podcast, but the sovereignty of God doesn't mean that God manipulates every little thing that has ever happened or ever will happen. Not at all. But He is over everything. But He has granted us free will, and He has set laws in motion that will be in motion until He decides to end that motion.
Yes.
When everything is destroyed.
Yes.
And that's on His clock, not mine.
That's right.
I just have to live here until He decides it. The faithful will endure, looking beyond present suffering to the eternal reward. Okay, so, and I know Paul in 2 Corinthians 4 is talking about his particular persecution, his life, but the light affliction, which is but for a moment, tornado. So we lived in Pensacola for almost 8 years. You can see a hurricane coming days away, and you can prepare. You can sandbag your place. You can get out. Fortunately, we never experienced anything like that. But a tornado, man, it drops out of the sky. Now you've got radar and technology, but it drops out of the sky. It's there and then it's gone, and you're left with everything some of those folks in Cave City maybe built for 50 years. It's scattered all over the county. The wrong person to blame is God, but the faithful will endure because we look beyond the temporary, I say setbacks, but that's not a harsh enough word. Trials that we have to face, whether it's, again, a natural disaster, some kind of physical, bodily issue we have to deal with, whatever, disease. There's something much better. something much better beyond than the worst thing that can happen here.
You mean we're not living our best life now, like Joel Osteen says?
I don't know. I forgot to read that book, but
Oh man, you ain't lived.
yeah. All right.
You got to name it and claim it, my man.
Well, I might get on Amazon and check that out. But
Sakes alive.
I don't know
I'm
how
sorry,
to
Lord.
I don't know how to word that exactly. The eternity that waits, the heights of it,
Are
they're
absolute.
higher than the lowest of the lows. The
So-
highest high is lower.
It's some of these political pundits that I watch, they describe children. Before you have children, you do have an altogether easier and quote unquote better life, depending on your metrics. When you have children, your worries and your tragedies are going to be like if you think, you know, I don't know where they can see me. You're rising up the hill and you're at the crest of the wave, and you're feeling real good and you're joyous, and then you fall down because that's tragedy, anxiety, and stuff like that. So before children, you might be like this. All right. After children, your joy is way up here, but then what happens whenever that little doe-eyed, pale-skinned, blonde-headed boy slips in the shower or slips in the bathtub and busts his little head? I remember that night that happened, and Anthony couldn't have been much more than 18 months, 2 years old. Abigail was just born. He's probably about 18 or 19 months old. 18 months old. And LaBeth was in there bathing, and I had Abigail, and I heard something, and she hollered. He just busted a little old lip, but it was a white tub. Water was running. So it looked like the scene from that slasher where the guy killed that woman in the show. What's that? The Bates Motel.
Bates Motel, yeah.
Yeah. So
Psycho.
Psycho. Yeah. So I'm like, I looked, and I couldn't even hardly find where it was cut on the inside.
Yeah.
And we got him calmed down. But look, that was bad.
Right.
So that was she was up here, then whoosh. Well, that's what happens with your life from heaven, from the world to heaven. We have highs and we have lows, but in heaven, I guess we're just going to plateau, but it's going to be better than we ever thought of.
Right.
I guess I'm thinking of that. I don't guess I did a very good job helping you out.
No,
there.
that's about where I was.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm about as convoluted as you were, though. I think together we didn't do a good job cleaning this up.
No, you're right. It can be really bad, but it's going to be really, really good.
Exactly. What did Paul say? It's is it 2 Corinthians?
This light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory.
Weight of glory. This affliction we have is insubstantive. It's light. No matter how bad it is here, it's technically light compared to the substantive glory of the next life.
Right.
So if all you do is you are born, you live, and you die in relative luxurious comfort, you still have lived a tragic life. In heaven, it's going to be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
In heaven, it's going to be so much better.
Yeah. And so that section starts out with, therefore we do not lose heart. So you don't faint, again, no matter how bad it gets.
Yeah.
And it can get bad.
Yes.
And so, okay, a tornado, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But how you react in that moment can make it a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
You know? So you and I were talking earlier about like emotional responses to things and how like sometimes I don't think I have enough. I'm like more just level and matter of fact. And there are very few things that I guess you would say can make me emotional.
Yeah.
But there are others who are extremely up and down.
My sister's response whenever I told her about last night, she had a visceral emotional reaction.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I guess that she's right. I guess we come about 20 or 30 minutes from dying.
I guess, yeah. But that was my response.
Yeah, like, well, we didn't.
Yeah, we got home.
We didn't. We home.
Had some summer sausage when we got there.
Yes, that summer sausage is so good.
I mean, but that's...
I know. Oh, see, look what I just did. We was talking about dying. And like, yeah, boy, that summer. Let's talk about the summer sausage.
Yeah, yeah.
we have that archetype where our baseline is we are not overly emotional people. Now, here lately, I've gotten really weepy about some things and stuff, but that doesn't have to do with my baseline.
Yeah.
My baseline's still pretty. Oh yeah, we'd stayed around, talked about 25 more minutes, we'd have been hunkered
We'd
down.
be dead.
We'd be dead. We'd be hunkered down in the church and sucked out of it and died.
Because that's what would have happened. And
It's that
what are you going to do?
We described reality.
What are you going to do? Yeah.
No sense in feeling a certain way about it.
That's true.
That we're not. You don't need to emulate that. We're not saying it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing either. I think the world needs all of that.
Right.
The world needs people like my sister that has a visceral, because
that keeps me in check.
It keeps me in check too.
Yeah.
Because it helps you help people.
Yeah.
Because I use this silly illustration when me and Brock Kendall walking down the road beside the bay ditch, and we see a fellow with his femur sticking out of his thigh, groaning, and he's laying in a pool of blood. We're like, oh, well, hey, have you heard about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? If you'll roll over there, you can be baptized. You're right there into the water. No, dummy, forget everything. Get that man taken care of.
Right.
But some people, whether it's just the way they are or they've been through a lot of trauma, whenever something like that happens, I remember my cousin one time, we'd been playing basketball at that big green barn that used to be there on Possums Rock Road. We played so much. Yeah, we were depleted on our electrolytes. We were sweating and hot, and he fainted. Well, here's what I was thinking. Betty is famous for making fudge.
Wasn't it right across the way from Betty?
Well, so it's technically, it was diagonal.
Yeah.
Diagonal, about 50 yards.
Yeah.
And happened to be his mother and somebody else had come down, and he fainted while they were there. Big old whop knot on his head and everything. Well, they had him rolled over. I said, Betty, did you get that fudge made? Now, here's the thing. My sister and Tony, how can you be thinking of He fainted because he's glucose bottomed out, and a good piece of sugary fudge would pick him right back up. I was not emotional. It was just
right.
It was problem. So if I had a piece of fudge in my pocket, I'd give it to him.
Yeah.
Or a slice of an orange. But they were so emotional, they couldn't understand why I wasn't. Yeah. And I was just thinking, well, you said you was making that fudge. Let's get some fudge in it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But they needed their emotion to get him turned over, make sure he's not dead. And then they needed my level-headedness to, now we can get him some fudge.
Right.
It
takes all.
That's it. It's funny how God designed things.
Yeah. Meat. Help meat.
MEET. I helped, and I was trying to find some meat.
So we look beyond the present suffering to the eternal reward promised by God.
Amen.
You got anything else to add to that?
Ain't much to it. That's what we look for. And look, experience your emotions, please. This was a tragedy. You're supposed to be sad. You're supposed to feel like a ship unmoored, drifting along with no control. It's normal don't pathologize the human experience. Experience this with the brethren. Grow with the brethren and with God. We're not saying for you to be robots, but, well, yeah, I lost my house and my husband yesterday, but, it's just reality. No, that's not what we're saying. God put these emotions in there for us to learn and grow and live, and ultimately, I believe, to be closer with Him. So experience them, please, and acknowledge the tragedy for what it is and be truthful with the tragedy for what it is, and you'll be in a much better position to heal from it.
Yeah. And to help others heal from it.
Oh, yeah. Think beyond yourself.
Well, the God of all comfort who comforts us with the same comfort that we can comfort others with. It's like a chain. It's kind of like you ought
to write that down.
You teach, I think
That'd
somebody
be good
else did.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere.
Okay.
It's like 2 Timothy 2:2. The things you've heard of me among many witnesses, the same teach to faithful men who can teach others. There's four links in that chain. Yeah.
4 spiritual generations.
Yeah. And that's about teaching the truth. That's about dealing with the tragedies of life. You can treat it the same way.
Well, I mean, wouldn't Paul have taught Timothy how to deal with the tragedies of life?
If anybody could, he would.
You reckon he'd know? He'd got some experience dealing with tragedy?
Deborah says it's the difference between men and women. And and mostly that's true, but sometimes it's the opposite.
Well, so it's on a spectrum.
Yeah.
I think I heard Jordan Peterson talking about some statistics. and women are about men are about 40% more aggressive. Well, we'll just say was in a fight, like physically strong. Men are about 60% of how I can't remember how the statistic worked, but here's the thing: you take a random sample of 100 men and 100 women, and you randomly sample from them, and you had to take bets on which one would be stronger physically.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to be right 40% of the time. I mean, you would be right 40% of the time if you pick the woman.
Yeah.
That's 4 out of 6 times. I mean, that's 4 out of 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a huge difference. But what happens is when you go out to the extremes.
Right.
You know, you take the top 10% of strength in men versus the top 10% of strength in women. They are all stronger than the women. So that's how it is with emotion and stoicism. Yeah. You take the most pragmatic, you take all of the men and all the women, and we'll say it's a 60-40 ratio again. So in the center, it's not a large differentiation you're going to find on the spectrum.
Right.
You know, because we may know some men that there's women that are way more emotional than, but that's in the middle. When you work it out to the extreme, you're going to see that as a whole, men are not as emotional as women.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think, working as a preacher, a local preacher, and like myself, I've been at 4 different congregations in 3 different states over 25 years. You meet all kinds of people, and you run into men that are more, and this isn't a bad word, but more effeminate, more emotional, and then you run into women who are more masculine and less emotional.
And used to, that would be fine.
Yeah.
But in this political environment, it gets a little sticky.
Yeah. But we are each other's help meet.
Yes.
And so we essentially, you might say, balance each other out. And I know that's specifically about marriage. But...
So think about it. Let's say that you have a man that's kind of, from my standard, would be overly emotional. He's typically not going to pair bond with a woman that's exactly like him, because he's going to find a woman that balances him out unconsciously. He's not going to look for her consciously. Unconsciously, he's going to find a woman. Because I think about some of these boys we met in their 20s today. Like, yeah, I can think of, like, his wife is probably the one boy we met today. His wife's going to be probably the one that takes over the conversation in public, and who is the advocate, and he's going to support her. And if anybody runs up against her, he's going to neutralize that threat real fast and in a hurry. But she's going to be the one that's out there in the front. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You know, my poor wife, everybody in Moncton and Moncton, New Brunswick, every store she goes into, they'll hear her talk. So they'll say, "Hey, do you know Tony Brewer?" Like, "Yep, I'm his wife." "Oh, we love Tony." Everybody knows her as my wife.
Yeah.
But she's perfectly fine with that. Could you imagine if I was married to a woman that enjoyed the preeminence? Well, we wouldn't be married long. I would make her miserable, and we wouldn't have had enough sense to change in the beginning so we could live together in our old age.
It wouldn't be a relationship. It'd be a constant competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just marry someone you suited to.
Yeah.
Or else it's a tragedy and it will strike.
Yeah.
See, I brought it back.
There you go. Since you brought it back, let's wind this down. You got anything else to say?
I really don't. I'm just really, this week has been so good for me, for many. I urge everybody, not because I think it's a good meeting, but because you'll learn a lot about me if you're curious. Go to the Greenfield Church of Christ YouTube channel and just look at that meeting. The second night, I forgot to turn on the deal, so there's about 5 or so minutes that there's no volume. But if you turn it up real loud, the Lord's Supper microphone catches it, so you can get it. But be careful, because it'll blow your eardrums out. Yeah. But I kind of felt it was a bad, like it was an ill presented meeting, because I preached it like I'm a homeboy. I'm a homeboy. I'm a hometown boy that is returned, and I'm just talking to people whom I love and miss.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really like a set of sermons.
There's not anything wong with that.
Well, that's what they told me, so I can only go by what they said.
So Brent Arnold is the preacher there. He's been there for a long time.
Everybody, look, you know how much I love you. everybody needs a Brent Arnold at their church, even Mammoth Spring.
Yeah.
Especially Riverview Church of Christ.
Yeah. Brent, yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I really don't have anything else, but I appreciate you being here.
I've loved
and
this.
like I said, I hate what happened at Cave City to the congregation. It's terrible. They're meeting I think they're going to meet at the high school cafeteria for worship tomorrow.
God bless them.
But my meeting started and ended on Friday.
Well, you just take that material and scrap it.
Yeah, definitely. So they'll make it all right. Our elders told me to contact their elders and say, we're here, we'll do whatever we can. And I actually got a text message from a friend of mine today, and we actually talked on the phone of our congregation's ready to help. I sent him a picture, and he was like, wow. He didn't realize how bad it was till he saw that the picture I showed earlier. So
yeah, and I was sitting on the right side about the center of that picture, those pews.
Yeah.
Right on the aisle.
Yep.
Now that's not where I'd have been if I was hunkered down.
Forget you. I was standing where the wall is.
Well, yeah, but you come on, Barry. Quit being melodramatic.
You had a padded pew, man. I was smashed.
I know. You'd have been a half lad for sure.
Well, anyway, we need to keep those folks in our prayer. There's no question about that. But we're thankful. As far as I know, nothing bad happened to any of the members, thankfully.
That's
the most important thing. Yeah. Definitely. So, Cave City Church of Christ. And
I think there were 3 deaths, though, associated with this storm system that came through this area.
Yeah. I think there were 3 there in Bakersfield, Missouri, which is not far from there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Tragedy, no doubt. But
God didn't do it.
God didn't do it.
And Satan didn't directly do it.
Right.
It's just a tragedy.
And we don't lay the blame at the wrong feet, and we press on.
That's it.
So, Melissa Price says, so you guys were at a gospel meeting there? But yes, we were.
Yeah, Barry was preaching it.
But anyway,
he said we ought to move a piano in, and here come the tornado.
Keep that congregation in your prayers, and actually the Bakersfield Church of Christ got damaged too. I saw that later today on Facebook. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. Tony's preaching for me tomorrow, so I'll just be sitting in the pew, and that's fine with me.
Be careful.
But I've enjoyed having him around, and we've spent a lot of time together the last 2 days. And he'll travel back to Tennessee Sunday.
I'm going to spend a night or two at my mother's and then head back because I had an engagement in Middle Tennessee, but they were double booked. And I was the last one they booked, so the
first one on the chopping block.
I was which, look, I'm kind of glad. I love those people, and I want to go preach to them and see them again. They're a congregation that I love dearly, that I've had a relationship with ever since school. And their good preacher, I love him as much as I love me. But I'm tired. I did not realize this trip would tire me out like it did.
Yeah, that's a long trip.
Oh, I said the last night to the Smiths, of all the dumb things I've ever done in my dumb life, was driving straight through from Moncton, New Brunswick to Hornbeak, Tennessee, or Troy, Tennessee. And I didn't do it on purpose. I mapped out this trip. And at 12 hours, I was going to get a motel and sleep. But I was feeling so good, I was like, well, let's just see 2 more hours. Let's just see 2 more hours. And next thing you know, I'm in Owensboro, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Which is about less than 4 hours from home. And I was like, well, ain't no sense now.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to have to sleep in Union City, Tennessee, which is only
20 minutes?
20 minutes from home.
Yeah.
But I mean, a wreck and a death 20 minutes from home is just as tragic as a wreck and a death 20 hours from home. So I would have pulled over and slept.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate it, Tony.
God bless every one of you. Thank you so much.
Enjoyed your content. Hopefully it's helped somebody. So I will upload this to our YouTube channel. I will upload the audio, which I've recorded, to our Podbean channel, podbean.com, and you search for Mammoth Spring Church of Christ, and you don't have to look at us. You can just hear us if you want to.
Which is far better.
Appreciate you guys being on here tonight. And I'll be back live Monday on our YouTube channel going through the Gospel of John, and Tony will be on his way back to Canada.
Well, on Monday, I'm going to be hitting the live streams again.
Oh, good.
Yep. Okay. Monday, and I've got a lot of stuff. I think I may revamp. I may do 1 live stream a week and 1 free-for-all Friday, but just try to really make them good instead of trying to do so much where I'm scattered.
And that's on YouTube. That's Christianity Now Streams.
Yes.
And Substack is Christianity.
Now, Substack.
Yeah.
And really and truly, the value for your buck is Christianity Now on the Substack. About 2 years ago, I tried to start learning how to write. And I think I got her licked. She don't jump.
I enjoy it. I literally read every article you put out.
Why?
So, well.
Don't you know? Go read Church Reset or something.
Yeah.
Good grief, man.
I've read that one too, and I liked it. Deborah says, good to see you both. Well, thanks, Deborah.
Good to see you.
Good to have
Yeah,
you
I
on
can't
here.
see a screen or anything. So for all you folks that know me, God bless you, and you really make it easy to keep taking one step forward.
Yeah.
And I hope you understand how much that's worth to me.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for being on here at a weird time. Appreciate it. Have a good night, and hope you are able to get out to go to worship tomorrow. And I'll see you back in here on Monday.
See you guys.